Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to break down one of the hardest decisions any new venture faces. When do you stick with a plan, and when you make a change? When do you pivot?
All right, so picture this. You've done it. You've launched. You've even got some users, maybe a little bit of buzz. But you're not taking off like you thought you would. And every single day feels like you're just treading water. So what's your next move?
Yeah, this is that really dangerous place where a company has just enough success, just enough users or revenue to stay alive, but not nearly enough to actually thrive or hit those big goals you set. It's kind of like a zombie state, and honestly, it's just a massive drain on everyone's energy and creativity. And the biggest trap here? It's looking at the wrong numbers. See, when your total user count or your gross revenue is ticking up, even just a little, it can create this powerful, false reality. It is so easy to trick yourself into believing you're on the right path, even when the core engine of the business just isn't working. The only real way out of that trap is to switch from drama to data. You've got to set up clear hypotheses and use metrics that actually mean something. That way, you create a framework that tells you objectively whether it's time to pivot or persevere. So let's see how this works in the real world. Okay, so let's dive into the story of a company called Vodazon and its CEO, David Benetti. He found himself right in the middle of that land of the living dead and used a really disciplined, data-driven process to find his way out. So Vodazon's first idea was a social network for verified voters. And after about 8 months and $20,000, these were their numbers. Now, right away, you see that activation rate, 90%. That's awesome, right? But look at the crucial numbers, retention and referral. They were terrible. And that told David that even if people kind of like the idea, they had absolutely no reason to come back or tell their friends about it. The growth engine just wasn't working. So he's looking at the stalling growth, and he decides it's time to pivot. Specifically, he does what's called a zoom-in pivot. He'd been listening to customer feedback, and he realized people didn't really care about the whole social network thing, but they loved the one feature that let them easily contact their elected officials. So he made a bold move. He decided to make that single feature the entire product. So he refocused the whole thing into a social lobbying platform, and wow, the results were dramatic. The referral rate shot up from just 6% to 54%. People really loved this tool. But a new problem popped up. Less than 1% of those happy users were actually willing to pay for it. So the product was valuable, sure, but the business model was totally broken. This led him to the next logical conclusion. The product was definitely valuable, just not to the individual activists he was targeting. So it was time for another pivot. This one's called a customer segment pivot. You keep the product the same, but you completely change who you're selling it to. So instead of trying to sell to individual citizens, B2C, he started selling to large organizations, nonprofits, and big companies. Basically groups that had a professional interest and, more importantly, a budget for political campaigning. Same product, totally different customer. And he started finding customers, but that B2B sales process was super slow and expensive. So to really scale up, he made one last critical pivot, a platform pivot. He basically turned his hands-on application, which took a lot of sales effort, into a completely self-service platform that anyone could use, kind of like Google AdWords. And that was the breakthrough. With this new model, where anyone could become a customer with just a credit card, all the key metrics got better. And most importantly, the percentage of paying customers jumped all the way to 11%. He had finally built a sustainable engine of growth. Now, what's really fascinating about this whole journey is how Vodazon's learning cycles accelerated with each pivot. I mean, look at this. The first MVP took 8 months. The last one? Just 1 month. This shows they weren't just building faster, they were learning faster. Each pivot was built on the tough lessons they learned from the last one. So the story of Vodazon really shows us that a pivot isn't just a random, chaotic change of direction. It's a calculated move. So let's take a look at the strategic toolkit of pivots that you have available when the data is telling you it's time for a change. So as we saw, Vodazon did a zoom-in, a customer segment, and a platform pivot. Each one was a different tool for a totally different problem. But they all share one really important common thread. They aren't just guesses. They're strategic responses based on what you've learned from real customers. Okay, so knowing your options is one thing, but actually having the courage to act on them, that's another story. Let's look at the high stakes involved here, because making this decision is incredibly hard, but failing to make it can be fatal for a company. Let's look at two quick examples. First, Wealthfront. They started as an investing game with 450,000 users, a massive vanity metric. But their conversion to paying customers was almost zero. They had the guts to pivot away from that fake success to a new model that actually worked. Now compare that with IMVU. They were a hit with early adopters, but delayed pivoting to meet the needs of mainstream customers, and it cost them years of growth. And this really gets to the heart of it all. The decision to pivot is almost always made too late. And why is that? Well, it's because of fear, unclear hypotheses, and of course, the seductive pull of those vanity metrics. They all create this powerful incentive to just keep pushing ahead, even when all the signs are pointing to a dead end. So the biggest thing to take away from this is that we have to reframe what a pivot actually is. It is not an admission that you failed. It's a declaration. It's a declaration that you've successfully learned something so fundamental that it requires a strategic change to your business so that you can succeed. It is a sign of strength, not weakness. So, this is the new mental model. A pivot isn't chaos or panic. It's a new, structured, scientific hypothesis that you then have to go out and test. It's a courageous step forward. So, the final question isn't whether you have the right idea today, but whether you're willing to listen when the data shows you an even better one tomorrow.